Good evening. Welcome to the Linnean Society. My name is Herbaria, and I'm one of the curators of the General Herbarium at the Natural History Museum just down the road from here. And as of this month, I am also an honorary curator of the botanical collections here at the Linnean Society. Very grateful to the organizers of tonight's event for allowing me to chair it. It is now my pleasure to introduce tonight's speaker, Professor Maura Flannery. Maura is Professor Emerita of Biology at St. John's University in New York, where she taught for an impressive 46 years. She is currently a research associate at the Andrew Moore Herbarium at the University of South Carolina, where she also assists in digitization of its collections. Throughout her career, Maura has made significant contributions to biological sciences, particularly in the history of biology and the relationship between biology and art. She is an author of over 60 scientific papers, 2 books, and a blog in which she regularly discusses her research. Her work has earned her recognition as a Carnegie Scholar, a Fellow of the American Association for the Advancement of Sciences, as well as a Fellow of the Linnean Society. Maura's current research is focused on Herbaria, a collection of preserved plant specimens, exploring their history, uses, and significance to science and society, a subject very close to my own heart. Her presentation will explore multiple dimensions of world's herbarium and will take approximately 45 minutes. It will be followed by 15 minutes of questions. And you are also welcome to join us to a wine reception in the library upstairs, which will start at 7 and finish at 8, where there will be also opportunity for further discussion. The floor is now yours, Maura. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's very nice. Good evening, everyone. I want to thank the Linnean Society, and particularly Isabelle Charmantier, for inviting me, and for everyone who has helped me get to this point in the presentation, and including the person who introduced me. And I have 2 disclaimers to make before I go any further. One is that I have totally had to redo my presentation from what I originally planned, because I gave a short presentation at Q. I've been here for 3 weeks. And at the beginning of my trip, I gave a short presentation at Q, and I wasn't smooth. I'm not going to be smooth tonight either, but I realized I was trying to read from my script and also look at the audience and check the slides, and I realized I can't do that. So I reworked, I got rid of the script, and I'm going to be talking from the slides, most of which are specimens, like specimens that I found to be important for some reason. And so that's the first thing. The second thing is, the abstract that went with this, I used the term that plants were like, they were like mummies, and someone told me that they had thought that was very apropos. And I'm thinking I got that from somebody, and I didn't attribute it, but I can't remember who it is. And then I thought it's Richard Forty, who wrote a book about the Natural History Museum collections. I went back to my notes, and no, he compared them to corpses, and that you lay them out like you lay out a corpse, very carefully and so on. And so I still don't know who it is, but I've stolen it from somebody, but I can't be responsible for that. The other thing is, the title for the talk, Padma Ghosh, who was very good about arranging all of this, wanted a title, and she said, the snappier, the better. And so I sent her 4 or 5 titles, and no, I came up with about 4 titles, and I thought, none of these are really snappy. And then I had written an article about Flatter Than a Pancake. It was about when you digitize collections, and the digital images are never the same as the real thing. And so that's where I got the flat from. So Patton was really responsible for that. But then I had to figure out how to make that title fit in with my talk. And so I realized that there is the issue of them, most specimens are very flat. Otherwise, they couldn't be preserved. They would just dry up in wrinkles and just fall apart, which they sometimes do even when they're flat. And so they get flattened and dried, but some are more flat than others. And okay. Am I not doing right? Oh, the click. You can see, I told you it was smooth.
Should try
that. Duh. Anyway, you can see these are from the herbarium where I volunteer on the left, and that you can see not every herbarium does this, where they have taken the pine cones and they split them, and they sort of halve them. But you can see how much room that takes up. And on the other side is the National Botanic Gardens of Ireland, Augustus Henry, who with Henry Elwes did a book on the trees of Britain and Ireland. His collection, which is where he worked, is at Glasnevin, and his wife arranged the collection, and the pines are in these boxes, which are haberdashery boxes that were used at the time with the cords to pull them out. So every herbarium, which is another interesting thing, every herbarium has a different way of doing things. This is where, so plants are not physically flat, and they're not metaphorically flat either. I think they're real interesting. They've got a lot of dynamism to them. They've got a lot of form. And I am particularly interested in the relationship. I've always, before I started this herbarium craze about 15 years ago, but before that, I've always been interested in the relationship between art and biology. And this to me is sort of the essence of that. This is Oakes Ames was a botanist at Harvard. His wife, this is at the beginning of the 20th century. And his wife was a portrait artist, but she also did all of his illustrations. She was also a suffragette. And so on each of these, her initials, everything she drew for him, whether it was a tiny pencil drawing or an illustration for a publication. And this orchid was grown by Rudolf Schlechter in Germany, Berlin. They went to Berlin, and Schlechter wore when he met him at the train station, he wore an orchid in his lapel. And so they could identify him. And then he and Oakes Ames went and did their taxonomy. And he had a big collection of living orchids too. So she did drawings of the living orchids. And then that those are the preserved, and they came back with the preserved one as well. So you can see how something is lost. There is something mummy-like about the herbarium specimen. And this quote, I think, is apropos here from Richard Mabey: "The quintessence of a plant can only ever be a fantastic goal, something to travel towards but never reach." And that to me is why you need the plants, the living plants. You need illustrations, you need specimens, and you may need a lot of other things as well, slides, microscope slides of DNA and whatever. But nothing is going, no one human-made thing is going to give you everything. So I always sort of have that in the back of my mind. Now I want to do, this is only 45 minutes, so I have to, and I'm going to do some history, the early herbaria, what I find interesting about them. Then I'm going to do some more history, but American, because I figure you know British, or many of you know British history, and you may not know American as well. And then I'll end with back to art and herbarium specimens. So that's the plan. So this is one of the earliest extant herbaria. It's one of the earliest herbaria. It's from Ulysses Aldrovandi. You can see his years. There are no dates on these, but it's sometime after the 1540s, 50s, which is when herbaria really started. He was a student of Luca Ghini, who was, he was probably not the first person to make an herbarium, but he was the one that was important enough in the Italian academic community that he sort of got the ball rolling. And his specimens are no longer around. This was a student, and there are some from another of his students as well. So this is really early. And you can see that part of it is no longer there, and that there are all of these synonyms. And you can see that they are indicating something about where this plant came from. Okay. Which was from South America. And this, at the time, there seemed to be a number of experiments where people were trying to get at how do you preserve the quintessence of the plant. And this is one in which, this is a copy of a print that was in Leonhardt Fuchs, 1542. That was one of the first good printed herbals with good images, what botanists would consider decent images. And someone has put in, I'm sorry, push the wrong button, has put in leaves from the same plant. And this is something that did not take hold. This is an experiment that didn't, but here are a few more experiments. This is more doable in that on one side, you have the specimen, on the other side, you have this is Felix Platter, he was Swiss. And you could see he's still early. He was trained in France by a man named Rondelet, who was in fact who had also worked with Luca Ghini. So you can see these people get around. And there are several books of these. They have about half, I think they have 8 volumes of about 15 that were original. But he did a few other things, little experiments. This one, he took a sunflower and took out this is a sunflower from the back. So obviously he took out a lot of the flowers in the front and flattened it out. And so you're seeing it from the back to make it flatter. And in this one, and there's another one where he's got the tulip and the tulip petals, like it's a full tulip. And the anthers are pasted on top. So because otherwise, if he had just squished the tulip, you would not see the anthers. So, and this one, that's a campanula, and that's a campanula flower. The campanula is blue, but when it fades, the color deteriorates and you end up with that. So he took delphinium flowers, cut them down, and attached them to this is another experiment that didn't go anywhere, you know, there are other examples of where two plants have been sort of hybridized, but nothing like that. And this is another experiment. This is a German, Johannes Harder, who was a physician, but his father made 12 herbaria survived that the father made in the second half from like 1570 to 1600. Father had there 12 of them. Most of them are in Germany or Austria. This one is the son, and this is in Oak Spring in Virginia. And you can see, and the father did the same thing. He has painted in the flower, and he has sort of context for the plant. This is the marshmallow, so it's a plant that grows near water. And not every plant has this much addition to it, but almost everything in the volume has something added. And in this case, this is very common to have this just grass. It's like the stem is put into grass, like it would grow there. The grass is sort of generic grass. But here it's a fern on a stone wall. You can see the rhizome there. And then one last one. I could show 100 of these, but I'm not going to. And this one is an arum. And almost every harder, the father and the son that I've seen will have an arum like this. That's never, you know, it's a big, thick, sticky sort of a thing that would have been hard to press. So it's just not there. And the same way with the bulb. So there are a lot of bulbs in this book, and either bulbs or grass, but most of them are roots. Most of them have something like that. And there are two other people in the same area. They were all in the same area in Germany. And it was like a fad at the end of the 1500s, early 1600s. And that's another experiment that didn't go anywhere. But I just fell in love with them. And I saw a couple of great ones at the Natural History Museum last week or the week before. And there were other, they're not experiments really, but there were other ways of sort of, herbaria became not just documents that were used. I mean, that's how Guinea started. He wanted something that could show students specimens when the plants were not growing. They called the herbaria hortus secus, a dry herbarium, or a winter garden. And so this is what he was using it for, teaching, and also as a way to check for himself on what the structure of the plant was. But then they became sort of status symbols. And this is George Clifford, who Linnaeus worked with, had to get Linnaeus in. And this is Linnaeus worked with Clifford's herbarium. And this is the way Clifford was rich in the Netherlands and was, in commerce. And the label and the vase. And they have been able to figure out there are certain, these are printed vases, and so there's several styles, and they tend to go from one herbarium to another, or they're only found in certain herbaria. And this is definitely a presentation. This is about status, and they're not sure. This again is at Oak Spring. They're not sure who did this. There is a name on the front, but the name has been crossed out, and they don't know why. And apparently, it's a pharmacist named Carlo Sambertini. This is from about 1720, and he made it for a doctor, Barbario. And you can see that he wanted to impress the doctor. The front of it is this is a good size one, and there are watercolor frontispieces that are elaborate, to say the least. And then inside, all the pages have that border around it, and these are silk ribbons. You can see the specimens are gorgeous, and they're beautifully prepared and mounted. Symmetry is big here. And then there's this calligraphy. So this was obviously an important doctor. Now, this is where I start. This is my idea. I want to stop, you see, because I can't talk and tell time at the same time. So now I can see where I am. And I think I'm pretty okay. So let us continue. And also it gives you a chance to breathe, to sort of shut up. And so now this is American history, but it starts with the British, with Mark Catesby. I'm from New York. I spent 70 years in New York. When I retired, I moved to South Carolina. And because I have a stepson, not even a son, a stepson and his wife, who invited me. And we're in a little town near the Georgia border. We're not in Charleston, and which is where, it's on the coast, and that's where Catesby arrived. But he did get up to our area on his journeys through. He wrote a book on natural history of Carolina, Florida, and Bahama Islands, or really 2.5 books. And he sort of is the founder of, he's not really the first, but he's pretty close to the first to collect plants that are still around. And they're at the Natural History Museum and also at Oxford. And because Hans Sloane was one of the sponsors of his trip, and William Sherrard. And so between the two of them, they got a lot of the specimens. They had first dibs on specimens. And so this is from the Natural History Museum. And it's poison sumac. Now, and the University of South Carolina has all of the volumes that he produced, and they've got first, second, third editions, which is really, see, I have to say something about my university, my new university. And they have now started a Catesby Center to study, Catesby's work, and I'm very lucky to be. I got there at the right time when they were starting this, so I'm very fortunate to be involved in that. So I had to get him in. And the next one is somebody who was born in the colonies, but who had very strong ties to Britain. And after all, Britain was the power in charge. And that's John Bartram. A lot of Bartram specimens are at Oxford, and they, however, and at Natural History Museum. But this is a collection that's in California. And he sent the plants over to, first of all, I'll tell you, this is obviously a maple. And these are his original labels. He used scraps of paper, brown paper, it's probably left over from something else. And I take this to be a maple. It's long pointed angular leaves. That's him, very remarkable. It groweth near, he was Quaker. It groweth near 20 foot high and 3 or 4 inches diameter in green bark. And this is a label, the Academy of Natural Sciences in Philadelphia. Someone from there, Ernie Schneider, did updated taxonomy on all of these in the 80s. Now, the way it got to California, so all these were sent to Collinson, who sent a lot of them to this Lord Petrie, who was a very young man. You can see, I didn't put his dates in, but he died in his 20s. And he and Collinson were very good friends. And he bought thousands of plants, seeds, and like acorns, and he was obsessed with horticulture and was working on his grandmother's Thornton Hall. It was his grandmother's estate, which he inherited. And so he was one of Bartram's first big customers. They sent plants over, small seedlings and things like that. So, and he had somebody make this herbarium for it. It's 12 volumes. You can see it's in very good shape. And it was bound, and they have since unbound it. And anyway, that after he died, his family sold all the plants, the rare plants he had on the estate. Collinson bought a number of them. The other rich people wanted what he had. And then the family kept the library until the end of the 19th century, when Adolph Sutro, who made his money in mining out in Nevada and California in the 19th century, had been a mayor, and he wanted the mayor of San Francisco, and he wanted to get San Francisco to have a world-class library. So he went over to buy books in Europe, and he ended up buying Petrie's. So this is how, that's what these kinds of stories I love. They start in one place, they go over to Europe, and then all of a sudden they're back in the West Coast. And so, and there's so much, like, you know, Bartram, we just have to keep going. This is just what I put in to show, I've got another one later on. Nobody knows who did this. Okay, it's somebody in the Jackson family. This was a family in an area, again, the southeast part of Pennsylvania is where the William Penn and the Quakers lived. And this was a Quaker family. They were there by this is from the mid-19th century, but they were there from the late 17th century. And I was interested in John Jackson, who's was of an earlier generation. He had one of the first botanical gardens in the country, and it was in a town, Pennsylvania, near Chester, Pennsylvania. And so I was looking at his papers, and they had papers at the Swarthmore College, and so I'm looking, and all of a sudden it says there's a plant list. So I hold my plant list. And I had seen plant lists from John Jackson. So I look, and there's a notebook full of plants. It wasn't a list at all. And nobody knows who did it. I suspect it was a young person, it could have been a woman. And each of them is numbered, and it's most of them have, as you can see, that's this up here is foxglove. So they have just the common names. But this is an example of all they may not be of tremendous interest botanically, but culturally, in terms of cultural history, they're amazing. And there are, and you have a gazillion of them over here, but I just had to represent one of them. This is a plant. This is a plant from an expedition out to, it's called the Wilkes expedition after the guy who did the charge, or the exploration expedition. And it was in the 1838 to 1842. This was collected in 1841. It's called Donatella californica. It's, as you can tell, a pitcher plant. It's got this unusual cord, so it's not a Sarracenia. And it was named for, I was supposed to change that to Breckenridge. It should be an E there, but just ignore that. And he collected the pitcher, and he collected all of this stuff. Okay, 1, 2, use here. But he collected, and 4. All of that is his material, but they couldn't identify it based on that because he didn't have the flower. John Torrey and Asa Gray got all the stuff, the American stuff, from that expedition. They were from that expedition went all over the world, but they went to Oregon and the West Coast, Oregon and California on the way back, and that's where this was collected. So they got all these plants, and they were inundated. John Torrey and Asa Gray were the two big names in American botany in the 1840s, 1850s, and Asa Gray into the 60s. And so he, and they both wanted to name something after William Darlington, who was from Chester, Pennsylvania, another Quaker from Chester, Pennsylvania, who wrote a flora of the area. So they were all, and he was in contact with them for years and feeding them plants. They were the sort of the botanists who, the closet botanists who sat and identified plants, and everybody was, and he was among them. And he was in contact with William Hooker, and so he was getting older, and so he decided, they decided to name a plant after him. This de Candolle, Augustine de Candolle. My pronunciation of everything is awful, so I'll just apologize overboard. Overall, he named the plant after him, and then George Bentham synonymized it. And Darlington called Bentham the invidious Mr. Bentham. So he was not happy about that. Then Torrey found another plant to name after him. And he was all set to publish it. And he hadn't published yet, but he stupidly couldn't wait to tell Darlington about it. Darlington gets so excited, send me seed, and, you know, he wanted to grow it and so on. And then when Torrey gets a package of seeds from this Gilbert Hulse several years later, and he opens it up and he finds a specimen of this plant that he was going to name after Darlington, and he realizes that it's not a new species. He was wrong. The specimen he had wasn't good, which often happen. You know, there's all kinds of things that can go wrong. So he's like, what am I going to do now? The guy is so excited. And then in the same package is a flower for the Darlingtonia. And so I'll name the Darlingtonia after him. He writes right away, because Gray knows all about this. Oh, and then he starts, in a letter to Darlington, he blames Gray because he said Gray sent me a bad specimen. So anyway, so then they end up naming this after Darlington. Darlington was thrilled and had this engraved on his tombstone, which is still in Chester, Pennsylvania. So that specimen, and I've got one more that's got a lot of history to it. And I have to go fast through this, though it deserves a lot of attention. Somebody sent this to me. She'd used it in a web post she did, but she just used it to sort of illustrate this plant, Herbaria radiata, which is a desert marigold. And it was a yellow plant from out west. And she said, this specimen looks interesting. You might be interested in it. So I looked at it, and of course, the first thing I see is the illustration. You know, and she said it was collected on Fremont. He's another guy who's in the army. These are all military expeditions. You know, they were surveying everything: minerals, plants, animals, lands, mapping, so on. Because nobody knew the West. And so that's the label for this one. And then down here, so that's interesting, Fremont, you know, it's a name everybody knows, or, you know, the United States. And so then there's this label down here for Trinity College, Dublin. My parents are from Ireland, so. And Dr. Coulter, Thomas Coulter, started the herbarium at Trinity College, Dublin. And same plant from California. And it was named by Harvey and Gray. And Harvey, William Henry Harvey, was the second curator at Trinity. Coulter only lived a few years. who died in 1842, and Harvey took over. And but he had collected this, and there's a story there, but I don't have time for it. But he collected this, and he collected plant. He was a mine engineer, but he collected plant in Mexico. But then he gave that up and started to collect plants. And he lives in California, and Arizona, so that's where this came from. So then the desert. And then the third one, oh, so then Harvey had all his specimens back in. Harvey was, into algae, and he's got all these plants from the West. Everybody wants plants from the West because, the West, there were a lot of new plants nobody had ever seen. So Harvey sends a package to Gray and says, you name them, but just put my name on it, because I'm giving them to you. So that's what happened. And so they identified it. And then a couple of years later, this Edmund Kirby Smith collects this one in the desert. And it turns out that he was he was on a military expedition with the Mexican-American War. And the war was a boon to botanists because, and actually, he was, Kirby Smith was in the army. I mean, he was in the army, but there were also botanists who went along with the military because it was protection. To go out into the desert by yourself is not a good idea. And to have an army behind you is a good idea. Somebody to feed you and protect you and so on. So keep you supplied. So there were a number of connections like that made. But Kirby Smith was with the army. And the reason why that name struck me, so this has a lot of history to it. The reason why that name stuck with me, well, because I was at the time trying to learn about the South because I had moved there. And this is from somebody from the South. This is in the Henry Ravenel collection at the University of South Carolina. And Henry Ravenel was a botanist who was born in 1817, died in 1887. No, 1814 to 1887. So he was over 70 when he died. And so his dates are right, like pre-war and post-war. The war sort of bisected his biography. Before the war, he was a plantation owner. He was a typical Southern plantation owner, rich, had slaves, and got interested in botany. He was not a physician. He just got interested in botany, specialized in fungi. And his collection is at the University of South Carolina. So that's for not every American herbarium, particularly a small one. We have 140,000 specimens. So not every, I'm supposed to be standing here. Can you hear me? I'm sorry, I've been wandering and I apologize. And I realize I'm not paying attention to this side of the room. So I apologize for that too. So anyway, he was running out of time. But so after the war, he had nothing. He has put all his money into Confederate war bonds. So he had no money. He had land, but nobody to work it. And so he had to make money. Each had to try to make money from botany rather than just being an avocation. And he had contact with a lot of people. This is another amateur botanist. I chose this one, and I'm not sure it's showing up. That this is on the original paper. It's mounted on the original paper. And then that paper is mounted on a new herbarium specimen. This was in a small college. All his fungal specimens, which are quite extensive, all the cryptogams really are at the Natural History Museum. And somebody from over there came over and bought them from his wife. But then the flowering plants were sold to a relative who gave them to the small college. And when they, in the 1970s, 80s, got rid of their herbarium, it ended up at USC. And so, and they've taken very good care of it. But he had an interesting sort of bisected relationship with botany. He had to go back after the war in collecting vascular plants because that's what he could sell. Worked for the Department of Agriculture, collecting and so on. You'd be happy to hear, well, this is just quickly, I had to put in a seaweed because they're just so beautiful. And the 19th century was the seaweed craze. And this is another American specimen, a girl in, and I like the fact she says this is an artificial arrangement because there are a lot of artificial arrangements of seaweeds, made into flowers and all this kind of stuff. But they usually don't identify the specimens that are in those arrangements. So this is, oh gee, look at her. Because there is an interlude, but it's going to be at the end. I'm going to go really fast through these. This is a present day. I wanted to do something in the present day. This is a present day collector. He's the curator emeritus at USC. And he's known for his long labels, but some of them are interesting. And John Nelson. And this is from after a hurricane. That's changes the landscape. And it caused a 1,000-year event, one of those, when there was so much rain that a dam burst and the lake bed. There are a lot of dams and canals in the south to regulate the water flow. And so the dam burst, the lake drained, and the next spring he collected this on that site. Now that's information that you wouldn't get if you just identified the plant. Or if you identified the plant and even said it was in a moist area or something. This gives you a different view, and it may not be unfortunately, once in 1,000-year event, but it shows a particular kind of environmental issue. And I know I'm running out of time. I'll finish in 5 minutes. Is that okay? Do I have 5 minutes? Okay. The second one is, I'm not even going to go into these, but you can see he's got this whole thing here. And this is about the universities from 1800 started. And this is one of the early trees. They have this big grassy area. They call it the horseshoe because there are buildings on 3 sides. And this is one of the trees, and it was damaged in another hurricane. So, and the third one, this is from his garden, but his garden he's documented. But these are interesting, not just, environmentally they're interesting, and it's also interesting, what's growing in somebody's garden in South Carolina. There are a lot of specimens he's snuck in there. Interlude. Okay. This I'll go through fast, although I don't want to. I don't want to do it fast. this is, oh yeah, there's a screen over here. I could be speaking from this. I'm sorry. I apologize to everyone over here. I forgot about this. I'm not smooth. This is in the Linnean Society collection, and it's what I like about it is this is an illustration, just the opposite of the other ones I showed. It's an illustration with tiny specimens. It's part of the flower, the polonium sepal petal. That's what those tiny little. Here, and there's one missing there. And how did they get to the Linnean? Well, he was not a fellow of the Linnean Society, but he had a correspondence with Darwin over pollination of orchids. And that's how that started. And Darwin then sponsored several papers to be presented at the Society. And so all those records are here. And I was here last week, and they have the illustrations that were used for the talks, but these aren't them. There are 56 of these big illustrations. These are big, most of them. And 12 of them have these parts, but I just find it sort of the opposite of an herbarium specimen. It's an illustration with pieces. And here he's got the pieces next to enlargements of the pieces. And here he's got sort of the flower laid out like a corpse. And you can see where some of them are gone. And the last one, he's got the whole stalk with the painting. It's a gorgeous painting. So that's, to me, that was really fascinating. So now we're into the art part. And this is a specimen from a woman in Kentucky, amateur botanist. Her herbarium won first place at the Chicago World Exhibition in I think it was 93. And she did a book on ferns. And she did illustrations for it. And that's one of the illustrations. But what's interesting is she did it as an herbarium specimen. She's got these are out in the Missouri Botanical Garden. But this is this plant reversed. And so she's making the illustration almost look like a specimen. Now I feel badly about this because I'm going to have to rush through these. There's only a few more. And two of the artists that I am showing here are here tonight. So I hate to shortchange them, but then again, I hate to bore them to death. So this is a composite photograph of various kinds of fritillaria by Lawrence Hill. And you can see that they're they're all in life size. Okay, so you get an idea of the variety and size within that genus. You get a sense of how some of the capsules are sort of bent, One of them is sort of reversed. This one I find fascinating. So they're very different. It's a way of sort of comparing variety within a genus. And he's got a lot of these, but and this is, and he has a legend that goes with it. This is from an artist, Scottish artist, who became infatuated with Herbaria when she's a portrait painter, and she was painting a portrait of a botanist, and she likes to include things from their life in the background, and so she included herbarium specimens, and then she fell in love with herbarium specimens and got a fellowship to go to study at Cambridge and herbarium and read books. And she did watercolors where she's got this tape. And nature prints, and, you know, just like multimedia kind of things. And what impressed me is she said she loved herbaria for their fragility and timelessness, which I thought was a nice combination. And this is an American, and she's, she works at, or had a residency at the Botanical Research Institute of Texas. That's BRIT, that's what we call it, BRIT, B-R-I-T. But she had a fellowship there. This is a specimen they had there. But there's a woman studying, she works at, she's from Peru, Colombia rather. She's from Colombia. She studies plants in Colombia, but she works at BRIT. And all these plants have come back to BRIT in the newspapers. So what she's done is sort of combined the newspaper, and which everybody who works in herbarium gets infatuated with newspapers. And particularly if they're old ones or ones from other countries. And this has got a rich glimpse. So it's got social history, playing with the social history and the botany and the exploration and so on. And this is Tracy Bush, who does, who did a book called, an artist book called 9 Wild Plants, where she asked people to name 9 wild plants. This is in Britain. And some people couldn't do it. You know, I'd email them to her. You know, people sent her emails and told her what the plants were. Sometimes they couldn't come up with 9. She asked for 9 rather than 10, she thought it'd be less intimidating. And some people gave her the common name, some people gave her scientific names, some people gave her both, the overachievers. And then she made a book of that. And then she also did other things with it. And this is a collage where she's used various kinds of wrappers that she finds for candy or crackers or chips or whatever. And this is basically a specimen of dandelion with a made of, and her argument is, which is a rather discouraging one, that people are more likely to be able to identify packages than they are to identify plants, you know, at first glance. So there's a lot of art now being made sort of in conversation with herbarium. That's really what I wanted to say. And I want to end with another collage, just because. And this is Mary Delaney, who did collages a long time ago, very different. But I figured I should come back to Britain before I left. And And also I love them. And so I want to thank everybody who came tonight, really, for listening to all this. I apologize for going on too long. I really tried, you know, I thought that the interludes would keep me on. I did well in the first interlude, but then, and also all the people, who, including many of the people in this room who have helped me in various ways. And so thank you very much for coming.